The streets were so wet and cold. The city was full of strangers. He was surrounded by unfamiliar faces and voices he didn't recognize. Big monsters who didn't even notice his presence. Strangers who didn't feel his pain. Rex was terrified. The icy rain hit his cheeks and mixed of his own hot tears. He sobbed quietly at the brick-covered staircase that leads on the outside of a tall building. He was lost, he was cold, and he was hungry. At his young mind was filled up with a variety of emotions that he wasn't able to tell apart from one another. He felt scared, hungry, angry, sad, almost every single bad feeling he could name all at once. But most of all, he felt alone. Uncle Randall was gone, Sully was gone, Mum was gone, and Uncle Randall had even said she wasn't going to come back. Rex let out another desperate sob. Why Uncle Randall said that? It was very mean to say, and it wasn't very true. Mum would always come back. Mum had always been there almost every single day of Rex's life, and she loved him. And so of course she would come back to him. And she just had to wake up from her nap first. Rex rubbed his eyes, partly to drive away the tears, partly because he felt so tired. He yawned and let out a hiccup. He guessed nap time was approaching. He had that idea that caused tears to start running again. Where he was supposed to sleep. He didn't even know his way home and Rex to his and his mom's house, and he couldn't find a way to Uncle Randall's place either. And he hadn't been able to be seen Sully's house before, so he didn't even bother to try that. He sobbed again, as the tears continued to fall, as they hit his tail, which he eventually noticed that was no longer invisible. Rex was very talented, but he couldn't fully control of his blending abilities, despite this giving it the best shot, as the red-tipped tail remained visible for everyone to see. The little monster sobbed again, and curled himself into a little ball in an attempt to hide his own tail from showing. As he did, he felt his eyelids getting heavier by the second. The feeling of caused him to close his eyes, and eventually sometime more hiccups and sobs he carried off to sleep. The sudden touch caused Rex to open his eyes in a flash. Something that he brushed against his tail, the little monster sat up, disoriented, and looked around again. He couldn't remember where he was, and the shook almost made him tumble down the staircase. Luckily, a pair of hands held him and kept him from falling, and he held him in a tight, mild grip. Rex overlooked at his own body, noticing that he was fully visible again, and he never managed to remain invisible during his sleep before, and he made a desperate attempt to camouflage straight away again in order to hide from whoever's monster this was covering his body, but it didn't obey him anymore. He could hardly feel his own limbs. The agonizing feeling of fear and complete failure caused Rex to cry even worse than before. He was surprised of how many tears he had left, but they just kept on coming. He grabbed a hold of the stranger looking at him, and squeezed his head up against her chest, causing her coat to get soaked with tears. He didn't care if she was a stranger anymore. All he wanted now was comfort, someone to hold him around and just pat his head and stroke his back, someone who whispered soft words in his ear. Mum. He wanted Mum, and he thought of her made him cry. It's okay. The female's voice was just nice and soft as her hands, and it sounded like it caused Rex's breathing thing to be a little calmer. He let out some more hiccups as he buried his face into her soft scarf. He wasn't alone crying just yet, though. Silent tears continued to run down his face as the stranger kept talking to him. You're safe now, honey. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore. It's okay. Then she quickly flipped over her cell phone and dialed the number. She waited a few seconds before someone answered. Then she spoke up to him, whoever was on the line, and she had a soft, calm voice. I have him. The female monster talked for a while, but Rex didn't catch anything that she was saying as he was too busy crying, as if he was something that would never be able to dry up, and the tears continued to run down his cheeks for a very long time. Even for some time holding him and he hung up the phone, Rex didn't feel like doing anything else but crying. Luckily, the other monster seemed to be fine with it, and she just stroked his head and whispered softly words as she carried him throughout the cold streets of the city. She even wrapped him up in a warm scarf, and that helped him a little. Rex was much calmer now, and he finally managed to talk between the quiet sobs. Why is there snakes on your head? I'm not scared of snakes. I like snakes. I'm very brave. I know you are, honey, and the snakes are so, well, I guess they are, just to keep me company, she smiled. My name is Celia. My name is... He was interrupted by another hiccup. Rex! It's nice to meet you, Rex. I've seen you before at the factory. I work with your Uncle Randall, Sully, and Mike. And my mom? Yeah. Celia hugged the little creature in her arms a bit harder. That's all right. That's right, Rex. She stopped for a moment and moved the orange monster out of the way from the one hip to another. Celia wasn't exactly the strongest monster in town, and was carrying Rex the way how she would be carrying a stack of potatoes. He was just hanging there, dead and tired, surprisingly heavy. A lot of monsters have been looking for you, Rex. We were so worried. Rex answered with another quiet sob, and he couldn't do anything in order to help Celia carry him. He was too tired to make effort, and the only thing that he did was to hide his face in her coat. We are afraid of something we might have happened to you. Was Uncle Randall scared? Yes, he was. He was terrified, Rex. He's scared a lot, Rex whispered against Celia's coat. He's scared of spiders and thunder, and grown-ups could be scared too, Celia. But I helped and I made it go away. I could take care of Uncle Randall, and he likes to take care of me. The quiet mumbling was a bit too low for Celia to hear, so she was just getting weaker and weaker, and by the time she met up with Randall, Sully, Mike, Fungus, Art, Terry, Squishy, and everyone else who had left Monsters Inc. in order to help with the search. The orange creature that she had held in the arms was sound asleep. After tucking Rex carefully into Sully's bed, meek Randall thanked everyone who had helped look for his little nephew, and they all headed for Sully and Mike's apartment after finding Rex. But now it was time for everyone to get back to work, except for Sully, who decided that it was probably wiser to stay with Randall right now. Mike and Celia wanted to stay too, and waved goodbye to the each crowded as they stepped out of the apartment door and left, relieved by the fact that everything turned out well. Then the little group of four sat down in the living room, and the silence ruled for everyone for quite a while. Randall looked at the floor, Sully looked at the window, and Celia looked at the ceiling. Mike looked at Celia, who slapped his hand when he tried to touch one of their tentacles. Not now, Googly Bear. Randall just grinned at the gesture. He was okay with Mike now. He still found it kind of amusing how things went a little bit with the little guy. Mike took notice of the smile. What's so funny? Nothing. It's just... Randall bit his lip. Thanks. Thanks for helping me today. His gaze dropped down, and Mike dropped to the floor again. I don't know what I would have done on my own if when it disappeared, or what if I have done if anything happened to him. Don't even think about it. Nothing's happened. Sully placed his hand over Randall's. Rex is safe, and we found him. Randall's eyes met with the blue monsters, and they held each other contact for a while, long enough for Mike to cough. Randall pulled away and looked at the wall as he was confused, talking. Yeah, we found him, and yeah, he's safe. He took in a short breath. But now what? What do you mean? Sully's hand was still holding Randall's, and the furry monster didn't understand what the scaly one meant. Sullivan, his mom's dead. What's going to happen to him? I thought you... I can't take care of him, Sullivan. See what happened today? Well, you're his only family. Mike shot in, but he couldn't help it. Sure, but it's just... The purple monster moved his gaze on to the other. I can't. With those words, he got up from the couch and headed towards the kitchen. At least in the direction that I guess that would lead him back to the kitchen. And he had never been in Sully and Mike's apartment before, and he didn't know where the things were located, so Mike was about to follow him, but Sully held him back. No, Googly Bear. She looked over at Sully and nodded. I think you better go after him. Sully was up and ready and sent Celia a thankful smile and followed the lizard monster to the kitchen. He found him by the sink, pouring the water into a boiler. What are you doing? Making tea. Randall, do you want some? No, You were soaked out there. You wouldn't think it would something warm in ya. I'm fine, Randall, but... I know you're about to say, Sullivan, but I can't take care of him, okay? Randall then turned and looked his head the other way. Sully was surprised to see more tears on his face. I'm his only family, but it's just too much, Sullivan. What's too much? Randall put the boiler down. I just don't know how many sore losers I can bear. Sully then didn't say anything. He just looked at the guy who had gotten to know him now over the past few weeks, and when the lizard eventually spoke again, his voice was thicker than before. When he disappeared today, I thought I lost him, and I've been dreading for that to happen since I got to know him. He rubbed one of his eyes. I lost everyone I have never cared about, Sullivan. My parents, my sister, my friends. Isn't Rex worth the risk you've been talking about? Randall bit his lip. He is, but Sullivan, I worry sick about him every single day. It would tear me apart. What if something bad happens to him? Sully walked up to Randall and wrapped his big arms around him. Randall hugged him back as he allowed his body to relax. The tears started to flow again. I definitely think it's worth the risk taking, Randall. The lizard didn't answer. He was busy burying his face in the fur and letting his desperate tears out. Sully then stroked his back and then gave him what he nodded time. Randall then had been through so much a very shot about this time, and the blue monster couldn't even imagine going through the purple ones he had experienced. So he had continued stroking him until he felt ready to talk about him again. I love him, Sullivan. I know, but what if I fail? You won't. What if something happens to him? You could figure it out, Randall. It will drive you mad. But what if... Then we'll help each other out get through this, as best as we can. Sully ran a finger through Randall's cheek. But that's why it's great to have others that you care for. Who cares about you in return, and when something bad happens unpredicted, there's someone else around to be able to take care of you. The scaly monster didn't reply straight away. He just needed more time to think. But when the answer finally came, he glanced deeply into Sullivan's eyes, and his voice was surprisingly calm for what he was actually saying. I'm glad someone is you, Sullivan. He leaned in closer and placed his lips against the soft blue monster's, feeling still amazed that it felt different each and every time. He ran his upper set of hands through his fur and onto the monster's shoulders, and when Sullivan stroked his fawns in return, his body shivered. Well, hello. This voice caused Randall to break the kiss and peeked over at Sullivan's shoulders and spotted Mike at the door. The little green monster smirked and walked slowly up the two who were already present. Sully was wondering what took you so long, so I just figured it out. I was just getting some tea, Randall coughed. And then your hairy friend walked in and, hey, it's okay. I've known about it, Randall. Mike's face gained a little bit more compassionate expression. Yeah, you know, you and Sul. Randall sent a glare at Sullivan, in the direction that the blue monster started explaining immediately. Mike knew I was into you before I did, Randall. And I couldn't be happier. You've gotten yourself quite a catch there, lizard boy. Mike then shot in. He was really happy about it, but when Sully had told him that he finally kissed Randall a couple nights ago, Mike had gotten excited that Sully had to calm him down. The green monster wanted his best friend to be happy again, and if Randall brought him into the bliss, then Mike couldn't even dream about being with anyone else other than Sully's choice of his blessing. So, great. So, I guess all of Monstropolis will know this in a few days now, huh? Randall frowned as he spoke. Have you already called the news channel, Wazowski? I haven't told anyone. Sol told me to keep my mouth shut about it. And will you write? Sully then shot in with a touch of nervousness in his voice. It's still very new, Mike. We don't know exactly what's going on, okay? I know. Whenever you're ready. Mike then both gave the monsters a pat in the back. You know what I want to start working? Is that tea, Randy? Then he turned on the heel and then walked quickly back to the living room. And Sully took a look after him with a grin, shaking his head while Randall looked at the hold of the boiler again and lifted up with water. Okay, then okay, what? I'll take care of Rex. Really? It's not like you have a choice, do I? Yes, you do have a choice, Randall, but I think you would regret it if you didn't. I know, but I love Rex, Sullivan. He's worth it. I'll take care of him. I want to take care of him, but I want to keep him safe. I'm always here to help you out, you know that, right? I know. Once again, Randall leaned closer. Thanks. He kissed the bigger monster once more, and yet again was surprised of how wonderful it felt. The future still terrified him, but brushed away the thoughts as it was concentrating on the present. Here and now, he explored more of Sullivan, and there had been a few things to discover every time that he kissed him.